nine, eight, seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
Hello and welcome to the Newchip Accelerator Q4 Online Demo Day Global Startup Conference. My name is Armando Vera Carvajal and I'm the Accelerator Director at Newchip. We're very excited to have hundreds of investors and entrepreneurs here joining us today, this whole week, from every corner of the world. This is our biggest demo day to date. We have over 100 global startups from the Newchip Accelerator pitching over the next 5 days. And this also includes over 20 industry panels and guest speakers participating in a diversity of discussions focused on addressing key issues today in the startup world. To kick off Demo Day, to kick off today, it's an honor and pleasure to introduce a very, very special guest. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Joe Lonsdale, co-founder of Palantir. Joe, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Armando. Glad to join you guys today.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we dive in, I'd love to share some details on your background, to share, some context with our global audience. So Joe is a partner at 8VC, a San Francisco-based venture capital firm, which manages about $3.5 billion. He's invested in many notable companies, including Wish, Oculus, Oscar, Illumio, Blend, and many more. Most notably, Joe co-founded Palantir, a multi-billion-dollar global software company known for its work in defense and other industries, as well as for providing the platform to run the COVID-19 common operating picture for key decision makers in over 130 major government organizations in 35 countries. Joe's also founded and remains as chairman of both Adapara, which has $2 trillion managed on its wealth management tech platform, and also OpenGov, which modernizes various processes for over 2,000 municipalities and state agencies.
A lot of big numbers.
Yeah, very, very big numbers. Very impressive nonetheless. And also Joe worked with PayPal while he attended Stanford. That's where he met Peter Thiel, and that's also where he received his bachelor's in computer science. So Joe, really cannot thank you enough for your time and support that you're providing not just our companies and investors, but also the global startup ecosystem by being here today. To start off this talk, I want to jump right into how you helped pioneer one of the most powerful and also secretive data gathering and analyses of private companies in the world, Palantir. This big data powerhouse has helped major government agencies, as well as some of the most important corporations in the world. Palantir has really changed the paradigm in how the government thinks about its mountain ranges of data. So, when you co-founded this company alongside Peter Thiel, what was the North Star or the ultimate goal for Palantir over the long term?
Sure. Well, it was 17 years ago we got it going, and I was only there full time the first 5 or 6 years, so I can't take credit for everything it's done in the last decade. But I'm very proud of the company. We were really focused on trying to build one of the top technology cultures. We saw a lot of companies founded by people who came out of PayPal, and a lot of those worked quite well. I think they're 16, 17 billion-dollar companies at least, whether it's Tesla, LinkedIn, Yelp, all sorts of big things that came out of PayPal. And the thing that we really noticed was the technology cultures where the best engineers, the best talent felt like they were owners, felt like they wanted to work there. Those were the ones that worked. And then of course the macro bet Palantir was making is to take a truly great technology culture, like a Silicon Valley level technology culture of the best at that time, and apply it to some of the East Coast institutional problems where you did not have strong technology cultures, because it turns out the technology world had gotten really far ahead in terms of their methods, in terms of how they approach problems, in terms of the types of technologies they're bringing to the table. And with big technology problems, you had the U.S. government spending even then almost $40 billion a year gathering data, but then the technology to help analyze, understand it, to protect civil liberties around it, like to collaborate within agencies, between countries. None of that was really set up with modern technology. So we realized that as a North Star, you have a really great tech culture that you keep long term, where if you have the engineers or owners and they're helping run the company, and applying this tech culture to solve really important problems to that are important to the United States, that are important to its allies. That was kind of the high level framework, I would say.
Gotcha. And, going off of that, I know that culture is something that you care a lot about. So, in your opinion, what values are important to build a great culture in a startup and also a business organization?
I think it's important to have a really clear mission. The mission should be something that it's false. It has to be falsifiable. It has to be clear what you're not doing as well as what you are doing. And with the culture, I think people should all feel like owners. You want people who are proud of who their coworkers are and who are proud to be working with them, and who are proud that they're an owner in this and their upside. A really great company early on, ideally, like everyone there knows they could be making more cash near term somewhere else, but they're making enough that they're comfortable, but you're also doing something that you really believe in for society. And if you don't get both of those, you don't get people working as hard. You don't get people giving their all these days. You're not going to attract the best people.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. You also served, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you served as a founding partner at Formation 8, one of the top performing private funds, and also the precursor to 8 VC. Given your extensive exposure to major startup deals, what's the single most important factor that you seek when backing an entrepreneur with your investment?
If you had to just say one, and I think the reason venture capital is hard is there's quite a few things that have to align for these things to work, to be totally honest. But if you have to just say one, I think the founder just being completely obsessed with winning and not giving up, and just persistence in a way that maybe other people would define as unhealthy is probably what you have to be going for here. I like to repeat this to a lot of people, like being a founder is not for everyone. It's not necessarily something you want your kids to do. It's kind of like training for a gold medal in the Olympics. You have to be obsessed. If you're not obsessed, you're wasting your time. You shouldn't be a founder. You should do something else. You should only be a founder if you have to do it because you're obsessed and you're going to just give it 100% your all. Now, if you want to say there's 3 or 4 other things that really matter, one, why is this possible now than was not possible 3 or 4 or 5 years ago? You need a good answer to that question. If it's already been possible for a long time, there's a good reason, probably a good chance it's not going to be something particularly big. If you want to start Uber or Lyft or Didi for ride sharing, if you do it before the smartphone exists, doesn't make any sense. If you do it now, it's been possible for 13 or 14 years, also doesn't make any sense, right? So there's only a certain time when certain really big things can start. So the question is, what are the big things that are possible now? Obviously having a really strong tech culture is really, really key for us. So you get a persistent founder doing something newly possible with a really great tech culture. There's lots of other things to get right, but that's like a really good ingredient for an early stage company that I can work with it and mentor it and try to help it win.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And oftentimes I hear, and we see it with our companies in the Accelerator, you have to have that obsession with what you're doing. And I would even say you have to be obsessed about the problem that you're solving, right? Because not just creating a product, but actually, or the success that comes with it, but actually the problem. Because
that's exactly. What are you doing for the world that the world's going to work better thanks to the fact that you're doing this? 100% agree. It's really the way I think of it for a lot of the enterprise stuff I do. You're taking a process that exists out there and you're making that process better in some way that's important to the people involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to Palantir, the company has come a long way over the past decade, obviously, and it now has a valuation worth over $20 billion. And it's, getting ready for an upcoming IPO this year. Now, many tech startups often aspire to an IPO as that liquidation event that can bring them, great fortune. IPOs are oftentimes where billionaires are minted, and the startup culture is they're all thinking of that IPO, ringing the bell at the NASDAQ or the NYSE is like that aspiration.
And I know the pandemic is going on, so we can't do that. It's frustrating, right?
Yeah.
It's ceremony we're supposed to have gone to do.
Yeah, you're going to have to, are they going to send the bell,
Seriously, you should send them a memo, please. That's a good idea.
Yeah, but,
That's my spaceship up here. I'll do it from up here.
I love the view, by the way. What are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that startups face in pursuing an IPO, especially in the current economic climate?
Well, it's pretty funny because obviously you have lots of SPACs running around, special acquisition companies that are public companies that people found that then go buy companies, and that effectively takes them IPO in a new way by buying them out in reverse merger. And so there's actually not as many challenges right now as there has been historically. In 2000, when we had the bubble, and back then in tech, the whole economy was working pretty well. tech was not. There was a lot of fake stuff in tech that was too soon. And a lot of the ideas were right. They were doing them now, but they were 20 years early. So back then, the industrials were working, the tech was not. These days, it's the opposite. The tech is working and the industrials are not. So all the money wants to go into tech. So if anything, like right now is a very good time to be raising money for technology companies. It's a very good time to be looking at the public markets. A very large number of our companies are looking to go access the public markets in general in the coming months. And hopefully for the tech sector, it stays that way. It's a very positive time to get lots of resources for great tech companies. In general, you probably don't want to go public if you don't already have a pretty repeatable business model and a pretty good understanding of what's going to happen with your company. I think it'd be very stressful to be public and then not really know, and or to be at a stage of a company where one or two big deals could change a lot of things, because all of a sudden you lose one deal and your stock price swings like crazy, and it's just very distracting at that point. And I think public markets are for companies that have reached a healthy, repeatable part of their business where it's clear they're an ongoing concern. It's clear they understand the business pretty well. It doesn't mean you can't still be crazy innovative or can't still grow a lot, but you just want to check certain boxes before you get there. And I'm really glad to see a bunch of these companies, including Palantir, seems like they've clearly gotten to that point.
Yeah, no, and going public entails also a very different set of requirements, stakeholders, obviously working with Wall Street and going off of a quarterly earnings sort of calendar brings different challenges to the company. So it's
in some ways it's a good thing to mature some of these things too, because in a lot of ways you do want to have certain discipline at a certain stage of the company. And so I'm actually generally in favor of the discipline that it brings, as long as you have a strong enough leader to make sure that the focus doesn't entirely go towards the short term. Of course, you still need to have the 2, 3, 5 year plans. So if you have a strong leader, it's not an unhealthy discipline for the company.
Gotcha. And, companies, especially in the accelerator, they oftentimes try to think early on about their exit strategy. How do you think for those who are aspiring to an IPO long term, how should they be conveying that vision to potential?
Yeah, so I think so in general, there's two ways to build companies. One way is you're thinking about the exit strategy early, and that usually doesn't mean IPO. Usually you're thinking about exit strategy early, you're trying to build it so a strategic's going to want it. And the vast majority of exits in the technology world are selling to other companies. They're building something somebody's going to need and want, whether it's Cisco that usually outsources innovation that way, whether it's any of the big tech companies with all the cash they have on their balance sheets, bringing things in. And so in general, if you're planning for an exit early, it's probably not something a big venture fund's going to be as excited about, but you can make a lot of money selling something for 20, 50, 100, plus by planning what they need and building something right for the big guys. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a great way to build something for a few years. If you're not planning on building it for an early exit, I don't think you should be thinking at all about the IPO or the other types of stuff. And what tends to happen if you just be building a great business, if you build a great business and the business is really working, there's going to be strategics and others who want to buy you. And my job as a venture capitalist, funny enough, is trying to convince founders and their spouses not to sell the companies too early, because if you're doing a great job, I'm in a lot of great founders, and a lot of them can sell their business tomorrow if they wanted to, and but I think it's worth another 10x, and I'd rather our fund with the founder got the extra 10 or 20x or whatever, versus giving that 10 or 20x to the PE firm or the strategic company that could be buying them now. So I spend a lot of time convincing people not to sell and not to exit, because it's a better solution for all of us and our investors. In terms of IPO, the back of the envelope rule is you probably want to have an order of 100 million revenue, and with repeatable business. That's really typical SaaS company. If you have very different margins, it could be bigger, it could be different. But I think you get a repeatable business model with the order of 100 million run rate, and that year or next you're ready to go. And it's probably not a bad idea. Especially it's been a decade, you really should try to go, because I really think it's better. You kind of owe it, in my opinion, to the early shareholders, early people who built the company with you. A lot of these people might have given it their all for 5, 6, 7 years, and now they're maybe getting married and want to buy a house. It's not really appropriate to keep them locked up for too long. So I think after a decade, if you're getting to 100 million, that's about the time to IPO. But I really don't think it's the right thing to focus on when you're starting off.
Right. Agreed. Absolutely agree on that. Shifting a little bit away from IPOs and exits, you met Peter Thiel while at PayPal.
Yeah, it's Stanford actually brought me into PayPal. That's right.
Stanford, yeah, but then through PayPal as well. And you both went on to co-found Palantir. I'm very interested in learning about how that relationship developed, as well as what you had to do to win the trust and the support of Peter Thiel, one of the most prominent venture capitalists.
Well, he wasn't really one of the most prominent guys back then, which I think is a really important distinction. I think a mistake a lot of people make who are up and coming in their career is they kind of see like maybe there's probably 5 or 10 names of like the most prominent people, or even 20 or 30 of really, really prominent builders and investors. And they like, oh, I really want to know Elon. Could you introduce me to Elon? It'd be so cool if I could meet Elon or Peter. And it's true, Elon and Peter are really cool. That's probably not the best use of your time to try to get to know them. But much better use of your time would be find somebody who's built a company that's just worth $1 billion and they're still young and they're still building more things. And there's someone who you intellectually agree with about certain things or want to debate with about certain things. Peter founded the Stanford Review. I was the editor of that paper. So we had a lot of things we agreed on, a lot of similar interests in history and economics, but a lot of debates as well. And I saw a lot of talented people who were from that kind of crowd going to work at PayPal. So that's why I wanted to get to know them. So I think the right lesson is not how do I get to know Peter Thiel, or how do I even get to know, I'm not at Peter Thiel's level, but it's not even how to get to know someone like me who's built so many of these big companies. It's what you got to do is you got to reach out, meet people who have had some success, who are up and coming, and find the ones you respect, find the ones you're interested in, and find the ones where you have similar interests. And getting to know them is very valuable. I did this on purpose with about 10 or 15 people at that time when I was at Stanford, and Peter was the one who I got along with best and who I really admired, and realized I could learn a lot from him. And so I started working with him. About a couple of years after I met him, he was the first investor in Facebook, and so a lot of these things that kind of really made him famous happened afterwards. And so I just be really careful. I think people are a little too quick to seek like getting to know the really famous people.
Right. No, I agree. And I think that's what's so unique about the relationship you had with him, because you effectively had to take a bet, right? And trusting him with this path.
It's totally right. You're taking a bet on people, and you're exactly. So you're like, who are the up and coming people you want to take a bet on with your time and relationships, and hopefully it's someone who's going to be loyal, and someone who, if you create value for them, they're going to create value with you as well. Right.
Absolutely. And in hindsight, obviously, like you look back, all the dots connected and it worked out really well.
There's a lot of lessons to learn from Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, you're also very passionate about public policy. And in 2008, you launched the Cicero Institute, public policy research think tank that delivers entrepreneurial solutions to public problems. Some of the issues that you focus on regard federal, state, local, domestic policy issues, including housing, criminal justice, healthcare, regulatory reform. Now, right now where we are today, our future world can slide down a variety of contrasting paths.
A lot of volatility right now on the policy front. That is true.
Yeah. But in your opinion, at the current rate of how things are unfolding across the economic, social, political spectrum, what does a good future look like for everyone? And what does a not so good future look like for?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. I appreciate that. We have a lot of great nonpartisan policy we're working on. Obviously, our criminal justice work has gotten a lot more popular. We were really big in this the last couple of years, and a lot of the way things are there really frustrated me. Again, totally nonpartisan issues. There's obvious things we should be fixing, and a lot of ways you can use incentives to help people. A lot of ways I think the biggest thing in America in general is how do we let the best ideas win and outcompete against the not good ideas. And so like best ideas, for example, is that there's programs in prisons that are lowering recidivism and helping people get jobs afterwards that clearly work really well. How do we let those better programs win versus the ones where they're not doing that and people are going right back to prison? And the reason markets work so well in our free society, the reason we say free society markets is that is these areas where we're building, we're testing ideas, and the best ideas are winning overall. And that's why we have economic growth. That's why we have progress. The areas of our society where the best ideas cannot compete and win, those are the big problems right now. Those problems in particular are in criminal justice. We need to fix that. They're in healthcare, where we have tons of cronyism, tons of bad laws that stop competition, that let local monopolies not be transparent. So we're trying to push transparency and competition in healthcare. I'll be honest, I start a lot of companies. Every time I start a company, wealth inequality goes up. And every time I go to the beach instead, if I just spent next year on the beach, wealth inequality would go down. Obviously, it's not better for me to spend next year on the beach. And so you have to really challenge. The problem is not wealth inequality. The problem is how do we create opportunity for the least well-off in our society, and how do we raise them up? It's better for everyone to be better off, even if the top people are creating more. How do we do that in a way where the people have lower cost of living, have higher opportunity? So I think we need builders and entrepreneurs and engineers more involved in government. We need people who are positive sum and understand positive sum economics more involved in government. And we need to teach people this culture of envy and this like really nasty partisanship on both sides is broken. So I'm very interested in fixing things on the policy side. Love to debate these areas. Love to teach people about these areas.
Yeah, no, and I love that you're passionate about that, because I think, I believe that entrepreneurship is one of the most important drivers of change and innovation today.
100%. It's the best part of our free society. It's hopefully we can teach everyone around it what it means.
Yeah, and when you marry that with an attitude for social change and improvement, you become dangerous, right? You can really change the world and make a lot of impact. So I love that you care about those ideas. You mentioned ideas a lot a few moments ago. I'd love to get your thoughts on what is the power of a crazy idea, and why do we need more of them today, now more than ever?
Well, it's just I mean that is what the world's built around, right? This is why humans are unique as a species. As we could take these things and we can make them real, and then if the idea wins, then it changes the world. And one of my favorite things to do is look at an industry, look at something that's going on in your life, and approach it a different way that other people aren't approaching it. And then the idea becomes like a cause. At first, it's just like a new idea you have. Then you can have a few friends and they kind of agree with it, and you learn how to express it better. And then you can start saying, well, I want to put this idea into the real world and I want to make it happen. And you start bringing other people in and start giving them a piece of the idea and start building things to push the idea forward. And ideas really are like the cores around which we build these causes, which we call companies, and which we sometimes call political policies. And obviously they iterate and they learn over time, but that's the core of what we're doing here is we're coming up with these ideas. And one thing that's really important is for ideas to constantly compete. So like a lot of entrepreneurs, when they're first time entrepreneurs, they say, I have an idea, don't tell anyone. This is a secret idea because someone might steal my idea. And you know what? There are billions of people in the world who are really smart, who are all constantly testing and building and doing things with ideas. First of all, we're not all waiting for what your idea is so we can go do it. We're really busy, so there's not a lot of people who are going to steal. Second of all, imagine there's 5 people like you who each have that idea and yours is really secret and the 3 other ones are really secret, but one of them is going out and talking to like 500 people in the industry and like learning from each of them how to make the idea better. Who's going to win? Like whose idea is going to be the best, after talk? The one that was kept secret or the one that talked to everyone and just learn whatever they could and then brought everyone in behind it, right? So I think it's really important the ideas are out in the open, they're competing. That's the way they create value.
No, I absolutely agree in that regard. You need competitors, and we need more competitors in our current environment so that we can keep pushing and racing towards.
It's how we get better. It's how we make things better for everyone.
Yeah. And I guess obviously like through VC, through your involvement in startups, you've worked on many different ideas and also with Cicero, but what are some of the future ideas that interest you over the coming decades that you would like to work on?
Gosh, well, I mean, this year alone, we're launching nearly 10 companies out of VC, and then we're investing in a lot more. So we have quite a few going on. It's hard to narrow it down. I think the areas are like, there's a renaissance in biology going on, and there's all these things we're coming to understand about how cells work and how life works. And, just using the cell as a unit of therapeutics is fascinating to me. It used to be that you use a molecule or you use a biologic like an antibody. A cell versus an antibody is like, it's like a million times bigger or whatnot. And so you all of a sudden have this much bigger thing. We've learned how to program, and we're programming it, and we're using computer science concepts in curing diseases in the body. And there's already tens of thousands of people who have been cured this way with kind of early cell therapies. There's a ton more happening. Gene therapy, similarly, monogenetic problems where you have one gene that's switched is causing you a problem. We can go in and edit that now and fix it. There's going to be hundreds of companies doing that. My friends and I are building a company that helps them, that just put several $100 million to work to build the capacity to help do these gene therapies much cheaper and better. So there's things like that going on that are very exciting. So that's the whole renaissance in bio. There's a ton happening in logistics. VC, my firm, is the most prolific investor in the U.S. in the freight space. We have, there's just a huge number of things we've done there in the last few years, and just a lot of ways you can use data to fix that space and make it better. I love logistics because it's one of the most competitive open areas where best ideas can easily win because there's thousands of options and it's just competing on price, right? So I think logistics is a great area for entrepreneurs. Really enjoy it. Healthcare is one of my very, very favorite areas of ideas. There's all sorts of ways you can actually so I don't know if just to get an example, like rural healthcare is a big problem right now. We need more primary care. The problem is that the primary care is very expensive there, and how do you make it work? Well, it turns out there's this new thing that we did both with Obamacare and with what the Trump administration did with CMS. I mentioned both administrations because they've both done good things here, where you can go value at risk. And so what that means is you can put more money into primary care to help these people in rural areas in America, and then it saves money later on because it reduces other costs of care and because of other problems. And then because you're getting paid overall for Medicare or Medicaid, the dollars you're saving, you actually get paid to have done that primary care ahead of time. I think it's such a cool idea to get paid to invest in helping people. Same thing with homeless people on these plans for Medicaid. You pay to help them ahead of time to save the emergency room costs, and you actually save money overall. So not only are you helping them and making profit, you're saving money overall for everyone. So there's actually ways you can use profit based on data and healthcare to everyone wins. But I just think that's such a cool thing, and that the incentives can line up that way. So those are a few areas that I'm excited about.
Yeah, no, so that was like biotech, logistics, healthcare. Are there any industries that that maybe you're a little too hyped right now that you don't think will be as big in the future?
I think crypto and blockchain are way too hyped. I think that Bitcoin and Ethereum are probably fine investments. Depends on the day and what they're trading at. But in general, there's way too many blockchain companies. Just way too many blockchain for this, blockchain for that. Most ideas, if they're worth doing, they're fixing a process in an industry, they're worth doing whether or not you're using blockchain. Usually if you're using blockchain, it's a sign that it's a second-rate team in my experience. So just put that out there, piss people off, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah, no. I would agree in that regard. Shifting this a little bit, what is one thing that keeps you up at night worried about the future, that you wish other leaders in this world today took much more seriously?
I honestly, the one thing I'm really nervous about is just understanding the basic building blocks of what a free society is and how a free society works. There's a lot of kids these days that truly don't believe that individuals need to control wealth and need to build wealth, and that we need to have a finance sector that's allocating wealth. And it turns out like finance is this fascinating part of our economy that's like 1,000 times smarter than government in terms of bottom up allocating resources to do useful things and to make the world progress. And that every time you have someone like an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates, like it just like helps the world so much that they create that wealth and use it how they want. And if you actually look at most of the wealth in the world, it's mostly controlled by governments. Trillions of dollars a year is controlled by governments. It's all in pension funds. It's all in local government, federal government spending. A very tiny percent overall is controlled by the Bill Gates and the Elon Musks and by people who are creating wealth like me. And I'm terrified that last percent that's actually driving forward the future is going to be taken away, and it's going to be destroyed and snuffed out, because people don't understand what a free society is and what it means to create and use the wealth to advance the future. So that's something I'm going to be fighting for my whole life, and to hopefully stop these Marxists from destroying our society.
And what's the worst case scenario there? Like what could go wrong?
The worst case scenario is they put in a wealth tax, and the people who are most successful flee America, and the last bastions of freedom in the world are extinguished, and we have only government spending money and only bureaucrats spending money. Everyone who's ever been at the top of these things, when they see a bureaucrat allocating money versus like a free, successful entrepreneur allocating money, they know it's completely different, and they know you don't want the whole world allocated by government bureaucrats. And it's just absolutely terrifying to me that these people, they think they're doing good, and they're naive, and they would destroy progress and they destroy the future of our society if we let them do it. So that's a big thing where we got to teach people and really show them, like, here's the best ways of helping people, and here's how a free society helps the poor the most, and make sure we really do that. Because that's, there's ways you help the climate, there's ways you help poor that don't involve these really bad Marxist ideas.
Speaking of government, historically, government has played a pretty big role in fostering economic growth in both science and technology. Are we today as a nation on track to continue the development of the next generation of technological research and innovation, or are we falling behind?
It's interesting that the R&D that's private has grown a large amount. There are good arguments on both sides about various types of government R&D. I think if government's going to spend money, the best thing it could spend it on is R&D and science and tech. It's a fascinating history. The mid-20th century was a very, very unique time in global history. It was a time when probably American government and other governments were by far the most confident they had ever been. And it probably had something to do with like the two different total wars happened one after the other. And so when you have total war going on, like everyone's focused on it, all the best people are going into it. On top of that, innovation was very expensive in the mid-20th century. You had to have these really, really big machines. You had to have tons of capital If you wanted the computer was like a really big deal. Like people thought there might be 3 computers in the world or 6 computers in the world. So you had this very expensive innovation where the whole world was very centralized. And the way the world works today is very different than the way it worked in the 50s and 60s. The world, innovation is not centralized. Innovation is decentralized. The most competent people have not been going into government for a couple of generations, unfortunately. That's just the truth. And when you have a broken culture, it's very hard to suddenly turn it into a positive, functional culture. And so we got to be very, very careful because most of the useful innovation, most of what's going on now is decentralized. So the government was in some decentralized way going to support innovation. If it's going to spend money anyway, I think it's probably better on the margin than other ways government spends money. But we should be very skeptical of thinking we could just turn back on the 1950s and 60s and suddenly have all the competent people in government and suddenly have all the innovation being centralized again. Like that seems just completely not the case. And so you have a lot of bad ideas right now around government innovation that don't understand the difference between today and 70 years ago.
So then, and that makes a lot of sense. What should our government, regardless of partisan affiliation or ideology, understand in terms of financially and institutionally backing?
Well, I think number one is top talent, right? Number one is like you want the top talent to come here. This is America's biggest advantage. If America is going to be a great country in the next couple of generations, it's going to be because it's the place, the very best people in the world still want to come, still want to live. And so like when we educate talent here, we should be advertising to them to make it really easy to stay here. We should be giving grants to stay here and not go back and build somewhere else. If someone wants to come here and get a PhD and then they want to start a company, we should be, why not give them grants to start freaking companies, give them 5 or 10K to hire, or 50K to hire people. Like whatever it is, like we should be advertising to talent to come here. We shouldn't be being nativists. This is like one of the dumbest things that especially the populist right does is this is anti-immigration thing. So I think that's the number one thing government should do is talent. Number two is they should make it easier to build things here. There's a lot of regulations in a lot of places. If anything, America itself is supposed to be a free economic zone. We really are. We're supposed to be a free economic zone, but we have so many places, problems now. Maybe we should build free economic zones in America and we should make it easy for talent to go there. So there's things like that we should be doing, and that'd be a great way to spend money is make it open, make it really easy to do that. I mean, there are other arguments. If you really care about AI and quantum computing, maybe there's certain things we could do. Maybe we could be putting, $50 billion into some really, really powerful supercomputers that we have competitions for who gets to use based on whatever's the most advanced going on in the country at any given time. I wouldn't be totally opposed to that. It seems like that'd be a good way to keep the very best AI stuff here and some of the other best stuff here. So there's things like that in the margin that are good, but we got to be really careful because a lot of what I'm seeing, what's called industrial policy, is very crony. A lot of what I'm seeing is people who can't compete with me in the market, can compete with me in spending time getting government to give them huge amounts of money for things that otherwise I was going to be doing better with my companies. So I think we just got to be really careful about the crony angle in this. And as much as possible, we should acknowledge that innovation happens in a distributed way. And we can do things like make it easy for talent to come here. Trying to pick what's going to be the innovative area, that's a big mistake.
Yeah, no, and that makes perfect sense with cronyism and cadres. There's been a lot of talk about the coming convergence of technology. We're already in it, as well as that impact that it's going to have on the acceleration of the future. The massive influx of big data aside, what do you think will be some of the most fundamental drivers for technological convergence?
Yeah, gosh, well, I think the most interesting frontier in the next 10, 20 years is just the human brain itself and really understanding the human brain and how it works and why. And I have this twitch where my brain has weird issues itself. I'd love to get that mapped out. But, just psychologically, a lot of us don't really understand our own motivations as well as we like to think, don't really understand why we make the decisions we do, why we're happy or not. Mental health is like one really big, important example of this. There's a ton of stuff going on there. It's exciting. But just overall, as we come to understand the human mind better, and as we can diagnose it, as we can augment it in different ways, as we help improve ourselves and let ourselves lead more rich and fulfilling lives based on understanding. I think that's probably the most interesting kind of frontier that we're approaching now over a longer term horizon. And there's just so many pieces of that are really fun. But I guess the other thing I'd say in general is just productivity really should start to go up a lot as we start applying AI to the processes in all these industries. And the biggest thing is as long as we can make the cost of living relatively low, which basically means not screwing up policy and housing and healthcare and education. If we can get the cost of living right, we're all going to be like super rich in 10 or 20 years because it's going to cost nothing to produce things. And so even people today who are making like 40K a year and don't feel very well off, they could feel like they're living like kings and like are super rich if we get the policy right. So it's just, I'm very bullish on the golden age we could be coming into the next 20 years if we allow technology to advance in the right way, and then we work on the problems that are hurting our cost of living for our poor and our working class.
Agreed. And that's fantastic. I believe in that too. Before we close out, Joe, what is the single most important piece of advice you can offer to the next generation of entrepreneurs and innovators?
You know, entrepreneurship is a very difficult thing. You have to be obsessed for it to work. I think the most important thing I found in my career, other than an unhealthy obsession and the amount of work I do, is I have a lot of really smart friends, and I spend a lot of my time convincing them to help me. So no matter what you're doing, you should be doing it as a team sport. And no matter how smart you think you are, there's probably someone who's better than you at each of the things you're doing somewhere. And getting that person on your team and learning from them and empowering them is probably the most important thing you could do this week versus anything else you're working on. So just make sure you're focused on talent. And the way to inspire the top talent is to be solving important problems and to be solving problems you really care about, because you can't really fake it for that long. It has to be real. It has to be something people see as real. So do something you think really matters and get the best people to help you. And that's what we're doing.